The top stories tonight in Y News. President Rodrigo Duterte has ordered the immediate termination of e-sabong or online cockfighting operations in the country.
With less than a week before the May 9 polls, President Duterte reiterates he is not endorsing a presidential candidate and encourages his cabinet to remain neutral as well.
The government's pandemic policy-making body is seen to issue a resolution to strongly urge private schools to hold face-to-face classes.
Shanghai, China is set to continue its strict lockdowns despite the recent decrease in its COVID-19 infections.
Good evening, Philippines and the world. Today is Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022. Join us in the next hour as we deliver today's top stories around the Philippines and in other parts of the world. I am Kat Numaraos.
We are also seen in 1,935 satellite monitoring centers nationwide and via live streaming worldwide through the UNTV News and Rescue social media accounts and our website, untvweb.com. I am Elsie Marcos.
First in the news, President Rodrigo Duterte has ordered the immediate suspension of the e-sabong or online cockfighting operations in the country. This after the president found out its negative impact to the Filipinos. Rosalie Cos explains why.
Department of the Interior and Local Government or DILG Secretary Eduardo Año has recommended to President Rodrigo Duterte to stop the e-sabong operations in the country. Secretary Año conducted an assessment and found out that many Filipinos are getting addicted to online cockfighting with some enthusiasts deprived of sleep.
May naririnig na ako loud and very clear to me that it was working against our values and yung impact sa pamilya pati sa tao. Ang labas hindi na natutulog yung sa bungiro 24 hours.
Thus, President Duterte announced he will end the operations of the betting game.
The recommendation of Secretary Año is to do away with e-sabong. And he cited the validation report of coming from all sources. So it's his recommendation and I agree with it and it is good. So e-sabong will end by tonight.
Duterte earlier rejected calls to suspend the e-sabong operation as it generates revenue for the government. The government was able to collect around 640 million pesos from the gaming operations monthly. Meanwhile, the Philippine Gaming Corporation or PAGCOR said it has no plan to ask President Duterte to reconsider his order. PAGCOR Chairman and Chief Executive Officer Andrea Domingo said that the gaming regulator will implement the order of the President. Rosalie Cos, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
Meanwhile, the Philippine National Police will immediately implement the directive of President Duterte to halt the operations of online cockfighting matches or e-sabong in the country. Leia Ilagan reports.
The Philippine National Police will ask the Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation or PAGCOR on the list of operators, betting and off-site betting station of e-sabong operations in the country. This after President Rodrigo Duterte directed the immediate termination of online cockfighting operations beginning today. PNP spokesperson Police Colonel Jean Fajardo appeals to the operators to immediately cease operations.
Desist na po sila ng operation dahil kapag lumabas na po ang official communication will direct the PNP to run after the illegal operation ng e-sabong ay wala po tayong sinuhin kahit sino po tamaan dito. Ilang pagtugon na rin po sa utos ng ating mahal na Pangulo.
Fajardo adds the PNP will conduct operations against operators of online cockfighting who will continue their operations.
Take po natin yung guidelines coming from the Directorate of Operations na ibababa po yan, inaasahan po natin na ibababa po yan na down sa mga police stations kung magsasagawa po tayo ng simultaneous sa anti-illegal gambling operation dahil once na nga po na may official communication namin from the higher headquarters or from the DILG po ay officially po ay magkakandak na po tayo ng mga operation to run after doon sa mga illegal operation po ng Isabong.
The PNP will also ask for the help of the local government units on this matter.
Sa ngayon pa lang po ay umaapilang po tayo ng tulong rin po sa mga local government units na nagbigay po ng mga additional na mga requirements po ng mga business permit na sana po ay makipag-cooperate po sila sa mga isasagawa pong operation po ng PNP bilang pagtugon na rin po sa utos ng ating Pangulo.
Fajardo appeals to East Sabong enthusiasts to follow the President's order.
Sa ating mga kababayan na ay tumatangkilik sa isa pong ito, mayroon pong pinagbatayan, may basihan po yung utos ng Pangulo po natin sa pagtitigil po nitong Isabong dahil nga po sa mga lumalabas na mga social issues relating po sa pagtangkilik itong mga ganitong uri ng sugal. Sana po ay tumugon po tayo, mas maigi po sana na i-divert na lang natin yung ating mga atensyon at oras sa mas makabuluhang bagay, hindi po sa pagsusugat.
It can be recalled that some policemen are facing charges after being addicted in East Sabong. Leia Ilagan, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
President Rodrigo Duterte requested the members of his cabinet to remain neutral in terms of their presidential choice. Meanwhile, the chief executive is encouraging Filipinos participating in the upcoming election to get booster shots against COVID-19. Rosa Licos explains why.
President Rodrigo Duterte insists he will not endorse any presidential bet for the upcoming elections even beyond May 9, 2022 or until the end of the year. The president made the statement amid speculations that he might announce his support for his preferred successor in the coming days. President Duterte also appealed to his cabinet to avoid endorsing any presidential candidate.
Wala akong kandidato pagka-presidente ngayon hanggang Disyembre para ano ninyo na wala kami, and even the cabinet. Hindi ko naman sila pinagbabawalan, but I requested the cabinet at the start of itong cabinet meetings natin na sinabi ko, kung maaari lang, kayo mag-remain neutral lang rin.
However, Energy Secretary Alfonso Cusi, President of Partido Demokratiko Pilipino Lakas ng Bayan, has already formally endorsed the candidacy of presidential candidate Bongbong Marcos Jr. While the president is not keen on endorsing any presidential hopeful, Duterte reassured the public that there will be clean and peaceful elections. Meanwhile, President Duterte appealed to the public to avail of the COVID-19 vaccine booster shot before casting their votes in the May 9, 2022 elections. This is to protect themselves from possible infections in polling precincts. As of May 2, 2022, 13.2 million Filipinos have been boosted against COVID-19 based on the recent data of the government.
There will be a crowding again of people congregating, and it would be good to have the boosters shots before you go out and mix with the crowd.
Some experts warned of possible COVID-19 surge after the elections. Rosa Licos, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
In a bid to ensure transparency for the May 9 polls, the Commission on Elections has started the final testing and sealing of vote counting machines in precincts nationwide. Dante Amento reports.
COMELEC Chairman Saidamin Pangarungan personally witnessed the final testing and sealing of the vote counting machines in San Juan City Elementary School this morning. The final testing and sealing or FTS of the VCM is the last preparation before the May 9 polls.
Very, very satisfied. I would consider it flawless, perfect.
Under the COMELEC rule, 10 ballots will be used to test the credibility of each VCM. Each machine will print a receipt upon opening that says 0. This means there is no pre-programmed election result in the machine prior to the elections.
Wala naman pong ibang nakaano doon, kundi yung kung ano yung binoto ko, yun yung lumabas.
Chairman Pangarungan disclosed he is satisfied with the outcome of the final testing and sealing.
I'm sure magandang impact nito sa voting kasi nakikita natin na yung proseso sa election ay okay naman dito sa final testing natin at saka sealing.
Meanwhile, the electoral boards and test voters also hope for the smooth conduct of the elections.
Sana, pagdating sa election day, ay kung paano nag-run ng very smooth ang FTS, ganun din ang mangyari for the election day.
Earlier, the COMELEC encourages the participation of the public to attend the final testing and sealing of vote counting machines from May 2 to 7 in precincts nationwide. Dante Amento, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
Presidential and vice presidential candidates share their insights on crucial issues that the country is facing in the COMELEC KBP Pilipinas Forum 2022. JP Nunes will give us the highlights of the first round of the panel interview. JP?
Former National Defense Secretary Norberto Gonzales was first to present his bid in running for the presidency in the panel interview organized by the COMELEC and KBP. In his opening statement, Gonzales shared his plans for the economic recovery. The former defense secretary explains that the country needs to mobilize large businesses to spread out in all parts of the country. He said this could generate more job opportunities for the labor sector, which can lead the country for economic recovery and development.
Tignan natin kaagad ang ating policy when it comes to triggering economic growth in the country. Dati-dati, ang nakakagawian natin, ang inaasahan natin magpapaunlad ng ekonomiya natin ay ilang mga negosyante lamang yung malalaki. Ang gagawin natin, ikakalat natin yan sa higit na nakakarami nating mamamayan.
Gonzales will also immediately impose a charter change to transform the country into parliamentary government once elected for the position. Meanwhile, the tandem of labor leader and now presidential candidate Calyodi de Guzman and his running mate Walden Bello also reiterated their call for empowerment of the labor sector. Calyodi de Guzman gave emphasis on providing enough job opportunities for workers and reiterated his call for the increase of minimum wage up to 750 pesos across the board. He said that the government should support the agricultural industry to help our local farmers. Once elected, the tandem of de Guzman and Bello will empower the agricultural and manufacturing industry to create more job opportunities for workers.
Ang isang importante natin dapat tingnan yung sistema ng ating ekonomiya. Kinakailangan nating baguhin yan dahil ang sistema natin ngayon ay ekonomiya hindi para sa mga manggagawa at masang Pilipino, kundi ekonomiya para sa mga malalaking negosyante.
Dapat talaga magkaroon tayo ng isang proseso para bigyan natin ng 40% of the cost of production binibigay ng gobyerno sa ating mga farmers. Taasan natin, that will magpapasigla ulit na agrikultura natin yan.
Tomorrow, May 4, the tandem of presidential candidate Faisal Mangundato and his running mate Carlos Serapio will face the panel interview at 10 a.m. which will be followed by Vice Presidential candidate Senator Vicente Tito Soto III at 11 a.m. That is our latest live. Back to you, Kat.
Thank you, JP Nunez, reporting live from Quezon City.
Presidential candidate Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. has maintained his wide lead in the presidential election race in a new survey released on Monday. A political analyst explains the factors that contributed to his high survey ratings. Nel Maribohok reports.
UST Political Science Professor Dennis Coronacion weighs in on the latest results of the Pulse Asia survey. Based on the survey, former Senator Bongbong Marcos Jr. still leads with 56% of the respondents choosing him. The 56% that Marcos got for the April edition is similar to what he got last March. According to Coronacion, the presence of Marcos Jr. in social media platforms after the 2016 elections brought him in the strong lead.
Buhat to lang nung maagang preparasyon lalo na dun sa social media.
Coronacion adds the current lead of the UNI team to their opponents may be hard to surpass.
Medyo mahirap mabuli yung survey numbers ni BBM kasi nananatili ito sa 50+.
The political analyst also clarifies that last Pulse Asia survey does not include the huge political rallies conducted by other candidates and also the shifting of support of some groups. It means the numbers could still change on election day.
Maraming din nakaka-capture yun eh. Like yung mga shifting political alignment sa ground level, hindi pa nakaka-capture.
Nel Maribuhok, UNTV News and Rescue, we serve the people, we give glory to God.
Meanwhile, after getting 2% in the latest Pulse Asia survey, presidential candidate Senator Panfilo Lacson stressed that the ultimate survey results is the outcome of the May 9 national and local election. Eileen Cerudo will tell us why.
Presidential candidate Senator Ping Lacson and Vice Presidential candidate Tito Soto III still cast a doubt on the results of the presidential survey. Lacson remains at 2% with 0 votes in Visayas and Mindanao. According to Lacson, he would rather wait for the election results on May 9 to determine if he really has no supporters in the two regions.
Much as I would not like to comment, ang sabihin ko na lang, the ultimate survey result will be on May 9. So I'd rather wait for the May 9, 2022 election results.
Soto said it is also prudent to look into survey results in other agencies to notice the difference. The public should also scrutinize the survey for its veracity.
Tignan nyo lahat yung overall ng mga surveys. Hindi lang yung isa, dalawang survey na pare-pareho ang resulta. Mula noong January hanggang ngayon, hindi nagbago ang resulta. Saan kinuha? Anong area kinuha?
Soto also advised voters to not believe in the opinions of others but rather choose candidates based on the platforms they heard and saw. Meanwhile, the Lacson-Soto tandem will continue with their dialogues with various sectors in the country, hoping that this will be the true basis in choosing a candidate in the future elections. The group said this is the legacy they wish to impart to the Filipino people to be scrutinized and questioned about their platforms and programs. Lacson explained campaign rallies are too detached from the people and Filipinos do not have the freedom to voice out their sentiments.
We really want to feel the pulse of the people on the ground. Hindi yung detached. Kasi pagka-rallies, napaka-detached nun eh. Ang nagsasalita lang nasa entablado, mga kakuna-kuno, hindi na bibigyan ng pagkakataon yung mga kababayan na tanungin kung paano ipapatupad yung pinapangako. At least sa mga susunod na eleksyon, baka yung man lang yung legacy na maiiwanan namin na somehow nag-contribute kami para baguhin yung kultura ng politics sa ating bansa.
The Lacson-Soto tandem conducted 2 town hall meetings, one in Muntinlupa and one in Batangas. Several of the questions they answered are about the rising commodity prices, assistance for healthcare workers, and how to properly implement laws in the country. Eileen Cerudo, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
Manila Mayor Isko Moreno expresses disbelief in the latest pre-election survey conducted by Pulse Asia. The presidential candidate explains that surveys may be part of a demolition job. Asher Kadapan Jr. reports why.
The result of the latest pre-election survey by Pulse Asia does not conform with the support that the Partido Acción Democrático receives from people in their political campaign activities. Manila City Mayor Francisco Isko Moreno Dumagoso explains this as he doubts that only 4% of the respondents who participated in the survey choose him as the next president of the country.
They are entitled to their opinion. I don't know how far is the truth. But there must be something wrong. Dalawang bagay lang yan. Kung totoo yun o hindi. 4%? Talaga?
Mayor Isko Moreno further explains that the survey may be a demolition job to project that there are only 2 candidates competing in the presidential race.
Baka mamaya, di naman na natin alam kung demolition job yan. Kasi from the beginning, I do believe, ito opinion ko lang. Ang gusto kasing i-project ng mga magagaling na tao sa komunikasyon, ito ay laban ng 2 tao lang, ng pula at dilaw.
Dumagoso instead believes that the silent majority is supporting his bid. The Manila City Chief, however, vows to continue to campaign directly to the people. Asher Kadapan Jr., UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
Presidential candidate Vice President Leni Robredo and running mate Senator Francis Pangilinan campaigned in various places separately as they enter the home stretch of the campaign trail. Herlin Delgado reports.
6 days before the May 9 elections, independent candidate Vice President Leni Robredo goes back to Western Visayas. In 2016, Robredo won big in the region by clinching victory in all of its provinces. In a campaign rally in Calibo, Aklan, the Vice President asked for reaffirmation of support from Aklanons. She also cited the programs that the Office of the Vice President extended to the province in the past 6 years. Robredo highlighted as well the importance of cooperation between the government and the private sector.
Pero ang private sector, gaganahan lang siyang tumulong pag inspired siya sa kanyang pamahalaan. Magiging inspired siya kung ang pamahalaan matino at mahusay. Dahil kung ang pamahalaan palpak, kung ang pamahalaan grabe yung korupsyon, tingin nyo ba tutulong pa ang private sector?
Robredo also met with supporters in the provinces of Iloilo and Negros Occidental. Meanwhile, her running mate, Senator Francis Kiko Pangilinan, is in Quezon City, the biggest city in the National Capital Region. There, the vice presidential bet visited Muñoz Market and talked with vendors. The senator also conducted a house-to-house campaign and attended a mini rally in Barangay Baeza. With the remaining days of the campaign period, the Leni Kiko team remains optimistic that the momentum is on their side as they intensify their people's campaign in a bid to claim victory in the 2022 elections. Herlin Delgado, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
More than half of public schools in the Philippines have reopened for face-to-face learning. The Department of Health says COVID-19 vaccines for the pediatric population may be administered through the school's infirmary. Aiko Miguel will tell us why.
The government is ramping up the COVID-19 vaccination among the pediatric population, children ages 5 to 11 years old. Currently, 2 million children are vaccinated against COVID-19. Health Secretary Francisco Duque III said during President Rodrigo Duterte's Talk to the People aired this morning that COVID-19 vaccines will be available in public schools.
So, yun po, gagawin natin, sir, pagka umaten sila, parang yung dati, nung mga bata tayo, niksyonan na tayo ng mga kanilang infirmary ng mga iba't ibang bakuna like measles, yung sa polio. So gagawin din natin to for COVID for the basic learners.
Interagency Task Force Deputy Chief Implementer and Testing Czar Vince Dizon said IATF Chief Implementer and Vaccine Czar Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. has issued an instruction for the availability of vaccines in schools.
We have the supply. We have about 15 million doses for the vaccines for pediatrics for 5 to 11 are already in country. We have about remaining about 10 million doses in stock. So we have the vaccines po, and these can be easily deployed to all our schools for our children.
Meanwhile, the country has now reached its 75% or 67.9 million fully immunized Filipinos against COVID-19. Aiko Miguel, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
The Interagency Task Force Against COVID-19, or IATF, is seen to issue a resolution to urge private schools to conduct in-person classes. Janice Hente will tell us why.
Education Secretary Leonor Briones raised concern over the low number of private schools doing face-to-face classes. According to Secretary Briones, out of the 16,000 private schools in the country, 676 or 5% are opening face-to-face classes. This number is very far compared to the over 25,000 public schools that have returned to physical classes.
Walang problema sa public schools kasi the minute ma-assess ang isang region or isang place na level 1 or 2, automatic yan, face-to-face ka agad. Pero ang sa private schools, of course, decisions nila yun. And so we are now aggressively endeavoring to convince them to open at this time.
That is why the government's pandemic policy-making body plans to issue a resolution to strongly urge private schools to hold face-to-face classes now that COVID cases in the country drop.
The IATF, I think, in its next meeting, most likely issue such a strong endorsement or strong encouragement for private schools in particular to go back to face-to-face classes.
Presidential Advisor for COVID-19 Response Vince Dizon admitted that there is some resistance from private schools to opening face-to-face learning due to various reasons.
It seems that it is a mix of various reasons, and the most compelling of which is that some parents in the private schools are still quite apprehensive about letting their children go back to face-to-face classes, which of course is the right of every parent. Right now, the challenge is really to convince the private schools to already engage in face-to-face. However, as articulated by the Secretary of Education, there is some resistance from the private schools.
Dizon said they will endorse the resolution to the next administration to further urge the opening of face-to-face classes in private schools. Janice Hente, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
For the news abroad, Shanghai, China is set to continue its strict zero-COVID strategies and lockdowns despite the recent decrease in its COVID-19 infections. Iya De Vera would tell us why live. Good evening, Iya.
Good evening, LC. Shanghai's ongoing strict lockdown recently showed a hopeful decline with its COVID cases, but are quickly disappointed on Monday as 58 new cases were identified in regions outside of its quarantine areas. Shanghai saw a significant drop in new cases with over 27,000 per day 3 weeks ago, down to just around 7,000 each day over the weekend. Chinese authorities, however, are determined determined to keep its zero COVID strategies of quarantine and lockdowns, much to the public's dismay. Ongoing fear remains over outbreaks, continuing to overwhelm the healthcare system and lead to more deaths, especially within the unvaccinated elderly. Experts outside China say that it is time for the country to start living with COVID, as most of the countries around the world have done. Vice President Richard Reitinger of Global Health at RTI International recognized the current effective treatments, such as vaccines that can aid China in easing up on its restrictions. Reitinger added that instead of lockdowns, social distancing plus double the vaccination efforts along with other effective preventative protocols should be the focus of the system. Millions of residents have been locked in their homes for more than 3 weeks with minimal to no access to food and services, and many continue to suffer from being locked down. Meanwhile, in Beijing, cases continue to rise and authorities ramp up mass testing for more than 20 million people to avoid reaching Shanghai's proportions and ending up in another citywide quarantine and lockdown. Elsie?
Iya, what are the latest COVID statistics for China?
Yes, Elsie, 7,822 new cases were reported Sunday, bringing the total cases to 217,452. 32 new deaths were reported from Shanghai, bringing the death toll to 5,092 since the pandemic started. 192,182 cases were reported to have recovered from the virus. Back to you, Elsie.
Thank you, Iya De Vera, for that live report.
After a pandemic lockout of more than 2 years, New Zealand has reopened its borders to more international visitors yesterday. People from more than 60 countries are now able to enter the country if they're vaccinated and COVID negative. Citizens have been able to travel in and out since March, while Australians have been let in since April. New Zealand sealed its borders in March 2020, requiring even returning citizens to complete weeks of quarantine upon entering. The government has credited the nation's low COVID death toll to its isolation strategy, as well as policies of rapid testing, tracing, and lockdown.
Japan Prime Minister's two-day visit to Thailand is expected to strengthen the long-term relations between the two countries. Charis Longbowen will tell us why live. Charis?
Good evening, Elsie. Japan Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's visit from May 1 to 2 is the first time in 9 years the said executive position had come to Thailand and coincides with the 135th anniversary of Thailand-Japan diplomatic relations this year. Kishida met with Thailand Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha and Thai delegation on Monday to discuss important issues of cooperation between the two countries. These include elevating their strategic partnership, enhancing economic cooperation for the future, and in the development of the sub-region and region. 3 agreements were also signed in the event: the exchange of notes on financial cooperation between Thailand and Japan governments, agreement on transfer of defense equipment and technology, and exchange of notes regarding the grant by Japan government under the Program for COVID-19 Crisis Response Emergency Support. General Prayut is committed to work with Japan's Prime Minister for the implementation of deliverables discussed in the bilateral meeting.
ผลการหารือระหว่างท่านรัฐมนตรีคิชิดะกับผมในวันนี้สะท้อนให้เห็นถึงความเป็นหุ้นส่วนทางยุทธศาสตร์ระหว่างไทยกับญี่ปุ่นอย่างรอบด้านและครอบคลุมโดยผมได้ให้คำมั่นกับท่านนายกรัฐมนตรีว่าผมและรัฐบาลไทยพร้อมจะทำงานร่วมกับท่านนายกรัฐมนตรีและรัฐบาลญี่ปุ่นอย่างใกล้ชิดและจะสานต่อผลลัพธ์ของการเยือนครั้งนี้ให้เกิดผลที่เป็นรูปธรรมเพื่อประโยชน์แก่ประเทศและประชาชนไทยญี่ปุ่นรวมถึงภูมิภาคโดยรวมต่อไปขอบคุณครับอาริกาโตโกเซมัส
Back to you, Elsie.
Thank you, Charis Longbowen, for that report.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warns the world of a possible food crisis as 4.5 million tons of grains were lost. Ryuji Sasaki will tell us why live. Yes, Ryuji?
Good evening, Kath. Russian missiles hit a grain warehouse in southeast Ukraine and tightened its blockade on Black Sea ports. The UN World Food Programme Director Martin Frick confirmed around 4.5 million tons of grain are now useless and just sitting in closed occupied Ukrainian ports. Russian forces also bombed the warehouse with fertilizers. Dozens of countries depending on agricultural enterprises for grain supply will be affected. President Zelensky said as he urged world leaders to prepare for an impending food crisis. Ukrainian officials also said that Putin troops have looted farm vehicles. 27 fleets of Ukrainian farm vehicles such as harvesters and seeders worth of 4 million pounds or 265 million pesos were stolen over a several-week period. Zelensky said Russia is trying to starve Ukrainians as a weapon against ordinary people. Meanwhile, in an effort to ease the impact of war in Ukraine, the Ukraine International Airlines or UIA had leased out its planes. Boeing 737 aircraft was leased out to Latvian carrier Air Baltic. UIA announced that starting May, the aircraft and crews of the Ukrainian airline will be temporarily based at Riga Airport in Latvia. UIA stopped operating services after Russia's invasion, which led to the closing of Ukrainian skies to commercial aviation. Kath?
Thank you, Ryuji Sasaki, for that live report.
Our kasangbahay. As the world faces these trying times amid the pandemic caused by coronavirus, we are inviting everyone to join the Global Prayer for Humanity from Monday to Friday, 9:30 p.m. Philippine time through the social media accounts of Members Church of God International.
And before we close, we will leave you with the word giving glory to God from the book of James chapter 1 verse 19. It says, "Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath."
And those are the reasons behind the news on May 3, 2022. Reasons we deliver to you as they unfold. I am Elsie Marcos, live from Auckland, New Zealand. Good evening.
Because we need to know, we will always ask why. I am Kat Tumaraos. We serve the people. We give glory to God.